Baruchim Aboim. Welcome everyone. Good afternoon everyone. Thank you for joining our trip this year. It's Be'ezus Hashem. It's going to be an amazing trip. It's really a great zechus to have the opportunity to travel through this country, which is one of the foundations of the Messiah of our Torah. So many great Gedolim lived here, and of course it's also a country that is soaked in our blood. But we're going to begin, and the learning that we do today is dedicated to Lila Nishmas Avraham Moshe ben Ephraim Avigdor Menachem Berger. Today is his yahrzeit. Neshama Shem and Aliyah. He should be a Me'os Yosher for his whole family, for all his descendants, for Besuras Toiva, Simchas Hanachas, Ad Bias Goel Tzedek. So when we talk about Poland, it's hard for us to capture and identify what exactly is Poland, because we know that it's a country that has been partitioned so many times throughout history, and its first partition was in 1772, but we're going to speak about Poland today in its identity before its first partition. And before its first partition, Poland included part of Russia, Ukraine, even Vilna, and Poland was an empire, and that's how we're going to refer to it as. The first well-known Talmid Chacham who made Poland his residence was Rav Moshe Mintz in the year 1415 to 1485. But let me begin by telling you something that the Ramah would say, something he spoke about on his deathbed. You know, the Ramah observed the fact that as Spanish Jewry was on the decline in the end of the 15th century in 1492, the Ramah observed that was when Poland was developing as the epicenter of Torah Jewry. Poland was the crowning jewel of Torah Jewry, but that only developed as the Spanish community in Spain and Portugal was on the decline. And the Ramah observed that the Ribono Shel Olam always pays the way, like Alman Li Yisrael, and as one tzaddik passes, even before that another one is being groomed. As one community wanes, Hashem is already developing another one. The Ramah saw the development of Polish Jewry as the way of hashgacha, allowing Klal Yisrael to have continuity. As Spanish Jewry declined, that is when Polish Jewry began to develop. In fact, the Ramah on his deathbed, he made notice of the fact that he heard recently of the passing of the Arizal, and then the Ramah himself was passing on, and the Ramah had a student named Rav David Gans, who he encouraged to learn astronomy, and David Gans was in touch with one of the great astronomers of the time, Tycho Brahe, and they had just discovered a new star in the heavens. The name of the star was Nova, and the Ramah hoped and he prayed that the discovery of the new star was a portend that Hashem was bringing new tzaddikim to the world, and new gedolim to the world, at the same time that the Arizal and himself were passing away. Now, contrary to what many people think, and I want to thank Mayor Glatstein on the camera. Thank you, Mayor. Contrary to what many people think, that Polish Jewry was always fraught with massacre and murder. Actually, the Jews in Poland had a very good situation compared to a Jewry everywhere else in the world. We enjoyed relative prosperity and peace. Obviously, there are notable exceptions, the Gzeros of Tach V'Tat, and then World War I and World War II. Now, it's very interesting. Have you ever heard of the expression, the Vad Arba Aratzos? The Vad Arba Aratzos. It's a term that people throw around, but if you actually stop someone and say, you know, what are the Arba Aratzos? You will never find anybody who could identify what the Arba Aratzos are, which four countries. So Poland constituted and comprised the Arba Aratzos. What were they? Originally, only three regions belonged to the Arba Aratzos. Number one, Greater Poland, which was Poznan. That's where Rabbi Akiva Eiger lived. Number two, Lesser Poland, Krakow. is called Lesser Poland. Then you had Red Russia, that's Eastern Galicia. And originally it was called the Vad Shalosh Aratzos. Then they joined, Vilna and Lithuania joined, and even when Lithuania seceded, nevertheless this term always remained the Vad Arba Aratzos. This was a powerful union, we could call it, of that the Rabbanim and the Askanim and the Roshei Hakal had, because the government of Poland trusted them and entrusted them in running the various kihilais. Now, in Poland there were very notable yeshivas. The greatest yeshivas in the world were in Lublin, were in Krakow, and they continued to flourish until the Gzeres of Tachvatat, 1648, 1649. At that point in history, that was the end of the Polish system of yeshivas. From then and on, you had great scholars, you had great Talmidei Chachamim, but they did not learn in yeshivas. They would gather together in the local shul. The Rav would teach budding Talmidei Chachamim, but the network of yeshiva and the power, the institution of yeshivas in Poland ceased with Tachvatat. Before that, you had again in Lublin and in Krakow. Now, this is very important to understand, and that is Polish Jewry was built on 4 pillars of Gedolei Yisrael. Polish Jewry was built on 4 pillars of Gedolei Yisrael. So number 1, the number 1 pillar, the first pillar, the foundation of all Polish Jewry is an individual who is somewhat unknown, even to learned Jews. His name was Rabbi Yaakov Polak, and that's why we made sure on our trip to bring Mishpachas Polak with us as in honor of the first Yesod of Polish Jewry. Rabbi Yaakov Polak was born in 1470. He was born in Poland. He was the Av Bezdin and the Rosh Mesivta in Prague. But a dispute arose there, and he had to leave Prague, and in 1492 he became the Rosh Hashiva of Krakow. I did not realize until this moment, if you were to ask, in what year was Poland established as a Talmudic center? 1492. That's when Rabbi Yaakov Polak comes to Krakow. Rabbi Yaakov Polak revolutionized Limud HaTorah, revolutionized the learning of Gemara. He instituted a method. I'm sure many of you know, he instituted something called pilpul. Pilpul is not what they have like back in the day in yeshiva. Every so often we had a pilpul shir. That's not what Rabbi Yaakov Polak's system of pilpul was. Pilpul was nothing less than intellectual acrobatics. It was making chilukim. It was, by the way, the derech halimud in Poland was they would learn something called halacha. What's halacha? In Amud a day, Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos. That was the Messiah in Poland. Halacha. Halacha is an Amud a day, Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos. The Talmidim would master the Amud. The Rosh Hashiva would then come into the yeshiva. The Talmidim would surround him, ask the Rosh Hashiva all the questions they had on the Amud. The Rosh Hashiva would respond. Then the Rosh Hashiva would tell the Talmidim his questions on the Amud and his answers. But what Rabbi Yaakov Polak did was, he would take different Gemaras and see if 2 random Gemaras were consistent with each other. He would make chilukim, differentiations, chakiros, not asuke shmaitza liba de hilchasa, not to get to the halachic conclusion, but to sharpen the minds of the students. And this was a very controversial method of learning. The Maharal was vehemently opposed to this method called pilpul, but it's surprising, someone who advocated for this system was none other than the greatest posek of Ashkenazic Jewry. The Ramah himself was an advocate of the system of pilpul. So the first pillar of Polish Jewry is Rabbi Yaakov Polak. Under his reign, Krakow becomes a tremendously learned city. Even simple people could not help but be influenced by the greatness of Talmudic knowledge in the city of Krakow. So now it's very interesting. In Ashkenaz, if you were a sage, what were you called? Chachmei Ashkenaz. No, in Poland you were in a chacham. In Ashkenaz, Charifei Ugaoinei Poland. You hear the difference? You see, in Ashkenaz it was a matter of knowing the material. So you were a chacham, not in Poland. Poland, they were sharp like a tack. In Poland, you were a charif, you were a goin. It's a different, that terminology captures the difference in the Talmudic process. Rabbi Yaakov Polak passes away in 1530. Rabbi Yaakov Polak, which Svarim did he write? Rabbi Yaakov Polak did not write any Svarim. Beshita. Rabbi Yaakov Polak did not write Svarim. His Mamala Makam in 1530 was Rav Shalom Shachna. The Ramah comes to learn from Rav Shalom Shachna. By the way, if you look in the Ramah's edition of his Shas, in the Gemara and Sanhedrin, when it talks about who's Mashiach, the Ramah wrote, Mashiach, Rav Shalom Shachna, Shenemar, L'Shichnoi Sidrashu, Uvasa Shama. Well, apparently Rav Shalom Shachna liked that, because he then gave the Ramah his daughter to marry. So, anyway, I'm going to tell you, in our generation, there's something called the Shidduch crisis. In Poland, there was no Shidduch crisis. It was unheard of for any girl ever to reach 18 without being married. It never happened. It never happened. There were no single girls in Poland for hundreds of years. Ever. And they had a system. And we're going to learn about that system. Whether we could adopt that system, lots of luck. Okay. Now, Rav Shalom Shachna was a student of Rav Yaakov Polak, and all the Gedolim in Poland were students of Rav Shalom Shachna. Again, Rav Shalom Shachna is the second pillar of Polish Jewry. For example, the Masas Binyamin, the Ramah, they're all students of Rav Shalom Shachna. And the Ramah writes in the Tshuvas, in Siman Chaf Hey, he said, I asked my Rebbe, why don't you write Svarim? And Rav Shalom Shachna says, look, because of his great humility, he felt that he doesn't want anybody to have to rely on his psak. I would imagine there was something more than that, and that is, in Poland they held, and this is found in the writings of the brother Maral of Prague, who did not agree with Ramah writing Piskei Halacha. In Poland they held that you can't ask someone a shaila. In America, they have something called a hotline. So if you have a shaila, you call up the hotline, and you speak to some rabbi. You never met him. You don't know him from Adam. He doesn't know you from Adam or from Eve, and he gives you a psak. In Poland, we held there's no such thing as asking a shaila. Are you Jewish? Is your mother Jewish? You have a Jewish name? So open up the Gemara, learn the Rashi, learn the Tosfos, learn the Sugya. You're the only one who knows the factors of your situation. What are you, such an Amma Aretz Gamor that you can't figure out a halacha? This was the opinion of Rabbeinu Chaim, the brother of the Maral of Prague, and he had a very big problem with Ramah codifying halacha. So I would imagine that Rav Shalom Shachna did not codify halacha because to be a vibrant Jew, you have to have independent knowledge of the halacha. In any event, Rav Shalom Shachna did not write any svarim. His yeshiva was in Krakow. Then you had Rav Kalman of Ramaiza, who was Marvitz Torah in Lvov for 42 years. And the fourth pillar of Polish Jewry was Rav Moshe Mintz. Rav Moshe Mintz was born in Mainz. He learned from his father, and then he learned from Rabbi Yaakov Weil. These friends were the four pillars of Polish Jewry. Number one, Rabbi Yaakov Polak. Number two, Rav Shalom Shachna, father-in-law of the Ramah. Number three, Rav Kalman of Ramaiza, who lived in Lvov. And number four, Rav Moshe Mintz. From these four Gedolim, Poland became the epicenter of Torah Jewry in the entire world. Talmidim from all over the world came to learn in these yeshivas, and everything we're going to see in the next couple of days, all the Gedolim that we're going to visit from Warsaw, Sochotzew, Kutna, Krakow, all began because of the roots of these four Gedolim. Soon we're going to learn about the 6 pillars of ideology that Polish Jewry was built on. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to try this. It looks like the severe weather is slowing down, so I'm going to speak now 5-10 minutes. This way we don't have to do it there in the rain. Also, Be'ezus Hashem, we're going to pray. Within 5-10 minutes, it's going to stop anyway. And at the kever, we're going to save, the real core information. But now I'm going to give you a background where we're going. This is the Warsaw Cemetery. It is one of the largest Jewish cemeteries in all of Europe and in the entire world. There are more than 250,000 marked graves and mass graves of the victims of the Warsaw Ghetto. So my great-grandfather, Zecher Tzak Devracha, who is the Rav of the city of Sochotzew, in all likelihood, this is where he's buried. Let me tell you the names of the Gedolim that we're going to visit here. Number one, the Chemdas Shloimeh. The Chemdas Shloimeh, Reb Shloimeh Zalman Lifshitz. We're going to be at his kever. Reb Aryeh Leib Tzins. If you see a random sefer in a shul, and you don't know who it's from, in all likelihood it's from Reb Aryeh Leib Tzins. And you want to see what a goyin he was? In his dying words, he says that anybody who helps publish his sefer, he promises great Yeshuas. So now he is the most published author of any of the Gedolim, because everybody wants a piece of the Segula. So we're going to the kever of Reb Aryeh Leib Tzins. Number 3, Reb Yaakov Gesundheit, the Tiferes Yaakov. Reb Yaakov Gesundheit, chief rabbi of Warsaw, from 1870 to 1874. And then 2 of the most notable, all-time great Gaonim Gedolei Yisrael, the Netziv, Reb Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, and Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, they were both Rosh Yeshivas in Volozhin, and they're buried next to each other. I want to tell you a little bit now about the Netziv and about Reb Chaim. The Netziv was born in 1817 in the city of Mir. His father was Reb Yaakov Berlin, who was a well-known Talmid Chacham. At 13 and a half, this is very important history to know, the Netziv becomes the son-in-law of Reb Chaim Volozhiner's son. So you have the Vilna Gaon. His student was Reb Chaim Volozhiner. His son was Reb Yitzchak of Volozhin. And his son-in-law is the Netziv. Now Reb Yitzchak of Volozhin, Reb Chaim Volozhiner started the Volozhiner Yeshiva. His son, Reb Yitzchak of Volozhin, took it over. At 13 and a half, Reb Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin becomes the son-in-law. He's, so to speak, the heir apparent to lead the biggest yeshiva in the world. However, the problem was he had an older brother-in-law, because Reb Yitzchak of Volozhin gave the older daughter to a Talmid Chacham by the name of Reb Eliezer Yitzchak. So, when Reb Yitzchak of Volozhin passed away in 1849, Reb Eliezer Yitzchak, the first son-in-law, is the top Rosh Yeshiva. The Netziv is second Rosh Yeshiva. But only 4 years later, the oldest son-in-law had an untimely passing. And the Netziv now takes over the mantle of the most important yeshiva in the entire world. The mother of all yeshivas, the Volozhin Yeshiva. All yeshivas today are offshoots modeled after the Volozhin Yeshiva. Now, question, I'm going to ask an opinion question. When the Netziv became the Rosh Yeshiva, do you think it was uncontested or contested? Do you think it was unanimous that the Netziv became the Rosh Yeshiva? It was contested. You know who contested it? The Beis HaLevi. The Beis HaLevi says, I'm the Rav in Brisk, and he contested the appointment of the Netziv. It went to a Din Torah. 4 Gaonim, Rav Yosef of Slutsk, Rav Tevli of Minsk, Rav Zev Hamigrid, Rav Yitzchak Elchanan Spector, Paskind, the Netziv, and only the Netziv, will run the yeshiva. Whereupon, the Netziv became the leader of world Jewry. That was the result of the Psak. Then a new movement began, Chibas Tzion, a open expression of love for the return to Eretz Yisrael. The Netziv was an active member of Chibas Tzion. Now, many went to the Netziv's Shiur. Not everybody was sold right away. For example, Reb Shimon Shkop would say, what sold him on the Netziv's approach to learning? They say, the Netziv and Reb Chaim were polar opposites. The Netziv's opinion was, in order to learn one blot of Gemara, you need to know the whole Shas. You can't learn a blot if you don't know the whole Shas. When you learn the whole Shas, you can understand one blot. So Reb Chaim Soloveitchik said, you know how to learn the whole Shas? When you learn one blot of Gemara and you get to the bottom of it and you get to like the core of the blot, you'll know the whole Shas. They had polar opposite approaches. And Reb Shimon Shkop at first was not sold on the Netziv's approach. One night, after midnight, the Netziv comes into the Beis Medrash, and Reb Shimon Shkop, as a bacher or a young man, was delving into a comment of the Rashbam. And the Reb Shimon Shkop goes over to the Netziv and he says, Rebbe, I'm having a hard time with this Rashbam. And the Netziv says, listen to this, do you know how many kvarim I had to visit to understand this Rashbam? Think about that statement. The Netziv says, do you know how many kvarim I needed to visit to understand that Rashbam? Now, I like that statement because that statement really endorses our trip. Because many people would say, kvarim, aren't there better things you could do with your time? Maybe it's better to sit in the Daled Koslei Beis Medrash. It's hard to argue with that. But you see, even a great tzaddik like the Netziv, in order to understand the depth of the sugya, he had to visit multiple kvarim to pour out his heart. In fact, he told his student, Rabbi Zalman Meltzer, that any day that he doesn't cry when he says Ahava Rabbah, he's not able to be mechadesh in his learning. So this was the Netziv. The Netziv was a tremendous masmid. I'll tell you, when he got married, he went into a small room in Volozhin, and he learned there day and night for 20 years. So they came to the Netziv and they say, is it true that you learned 20 hours a day? The Netziv said, no, it's not true. I only learned 16 hours a day. But I learned 16 hours a day Friday, and Shabbos, and Erev Tisha B'Av. I didn't miss one day. As the famous story of the Netziv goes, a bacher once came to the Netziv, and the Netziv says, do you know what learning is? The bacher said, yeah. Do you know what it means to be a masmid? What, Rebbe? The Netziv says, a masmid eats when it's time to eat, sleeps when it's time to sleep, learns when it's time to learn. You ever notice in many yeshivas, the hours between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. are packed? How about at 9:30 when the Seder starts in the morning? Maybe that's not the most glamorous time. The masmid learns when he needs to learn, when he's supposed to learn. He sleeps when he needs to sleep. He eats when he needs to eat. Now, let's come back to the Volozhiner Yeshiva. Remember, the Beis Halevi was wanted to be appointed the Rosh Yeshiva of the Volozhiner Yeshiva, and the Gedolim said no, it belongs to the Netziv. But the Briskers eventually got into Volozhin. Here's how they did it. Leave it to the Briskers to figure out a way how to get into Volozhin. The Netziv had a son-in-law, Rav Rafal Shapiro. Rav Rafal Shapiro had a daughter. This is the granddaughter of the Netziv. The Netziv's granddaughter married Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. So the Beis Halevi, the Tata, the father, he couldn't get the job. But now his son is heir apparent to take over the Volozhin Yeshiva. You hear this? So the Beis Halevi couldn't get the job. His son is married the granddaughter of the Netziv, and Reb Chaim Brisker starts to give Shiurim in the yeshiva, to the point where the Netziv and Reb Chaim were co-Rosh Yeshivas. In fact, there was no decision in the yeshiva that was made without the participation of Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. So he starts giving shiur in the yeshiva in 1880 at 27 years old, and his shiurim garner for him world acclaim. He taught thousands and thousands of talmidim, who many of them became Gedolei Torah. He gave shiur in Volozhin Yeshiva for 12 years. Now, in 1852, this is also very important. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of the Volozhiner Yeshiva, and when we finish, the rain will stop. by the way, the Netziv, in his second marriage, married the daughter of the Aruch HaShulchan. You hear this? The Netziv married the daughter of the Aruch HaShulchan. He was 30 years older than her. She ran a good chunk of the yeshiva. Reb Chaim Berlin, you ever hear the yeshiva Chaim Berlin? Chaim Berlin was the son of the Netziv from his first marriage. And his daughter from his first wife married Rafal Shapiro. And their daughter married Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. His son from his second wife was Rabbi Meir Berlin, who later changed his name to Meir Bar Ilan Berlin to Bar Ilan. Bar Ilan University is named after the son of the Netziv, Meir Bar Ilan. Now, 1852, the yeshiva is under tremendous pressure to include secular knowledge in the curriculum, that they should teach Russian and Russian culture. The Netziv's getting older. He's planning on going to Eretz Yisrael. Because you're probably wondering, friends, what country are we in? Are we in Belarus? We're in Poland. So how did the Netziv end up over here? The Netziv was Rosh Yeshiva in Volozhin. Let me explain. He was planning on going to Eretz Yisrael and giving over the running of the yeshiva to his son, Reb Chaim Berlin, and his grandson, Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. But on a Thursday morning, the 5th of Shvat, in 1852, the government came, and because they did not allow, as part of the curriculum, the Russian culture and knowledge, the government closed the Volozhiner yeshiva, and everybody had to leave. All the Talmidim had to leave. And they're looking. There's one person remaining in the yeshiva, the Netziv. The Netziv was there, but he fainted. They banished the Netziv from Vilna. He figures, okay, he's going to go to Minsk, and then from there he went to Warsaw, and from there he was going to go to Eretz Yisrael and fulfill his lifelong dream. But when he got to Warsaw, the Netziv had diabetes. He had a stroke here in Warsaw. He lived for 1.5 years, but it was no life. And the day before the Patira of the Netziv, he turns to his son and he says, "My son, many Gedolim say they don't want to be eulogized when they die. But that's wrong. It's wrong to say that. If Chazal say that a hesped does something for the mace, how could we be smarter than Chazal? Therefore, we are not authorized to forego a hesped. But how long the hesped has to be, you'll give me a short hesped, and I ask of you that after the short hesped, everyone should learn a few blot of Gemara instead of the hesped, and that will bring me kairas ruach in Gan Eden." The Netziv taught Torah for 46 years. He was 76 years old when he died. Reb Chaim Berlin said at the Levaya that the Yalkut brings that when the first Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, the young Kohanim went up to the roof of the Beis Hamikdash. They took their keys in their hands and they said, "Ribbon Shalom, we were not zoicha to be proper treasurers." They took the keys and they threw it heavenward, and a hand came down from heaven and accepted the keys from the Kohanim. Says the son of Rav Chaim Volozhiner. In Volozhin, when Volozhin closed, the Netziv came, he threw the keys of Volozhin up to the Shamayim, and God accepted them. Says the Chafetz Chaim, the Netziv did not have to close the yeshiva. He could have allowed them to learn a period or two of Limudei Chol, but that would have been a slippery slope. And at first it would have been a period or two, and then ultimately there would have been a period or two of Limudei Kodesh. The Netziv understood that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Hamariv Aravim Uvechachma Poiseach Sha'arim, that he needed to close the Volozhiner yeshiva so that other yeshivas throughout Lithuania and Poland could spring up in the age-old tradition. Says the Chafetz Chaim, if not for the Netziv, who knows if we would still have Torah today. Says the Chafetz Chaim about the Netziv, we say for closing the Volozhiner yeshiva, Asher Shibarta, Yasher Kaichacha Sheshibarta. Okay, so we're going to head in briefly into the cemetery. We're going to visit these Ga'inei Olam. It's a great zechus to be at the kever of Rabbi Yisrael Taub, the Moshe Rebbe, who lived from 1849 to 1920, the son of Shmuel Yahu of Zvolin, and he succeeded his father as the Rebbe of Zvoliner Hasidim. And in 1891, he comes to Modrzitz, a town in Poland, and he became known as the Modrzitzer Rebbe. He composed many nigunim, many melodies. Now, the Modrzitzer Rebbe suffered from diabetes. In 1913, he traveled to Berlin, and the only way to save his life was by amputating Nebuch, his leg. And before the operation, the Rebbe observes the architecture in Berlin, and he was very upset because relative to the desolation of Yerushalayim, he saw the built-up state of Germany. And during this operation, he composed his famous masterpiece on the words of Eila Ezkara, which is sung every year at the Modrzitzer Rebbe's yard site. Now he has a Sefer Divrei Yisrael on his Chedushim Bereishis Shemais Vayikra. Bamidbar and Devarim, his Chedushim are lost, but his great-grandson, Rabbi Yisrael David Taub, collected his Chedushim on Bamidbar and Devarim based on other things that the Zayda wrote, and that became the basis of the Svarim on Bamidbar and Devarim. He was Nifter in 1920, and he was succeeded by his son, Rav Shaul Yedidya Elazar Taub, Zechusam Yagein Aleinu. What an awesome place that we're standing, the kever of the Netziv and Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. The Netziv lived from 1817 to 1893. We spoke a little bit about him on the bus, but I want to focus on one aspect of the Netziv's personality that was unique among Gedolei Yisrael and among the way yeshivas were run. We mentioned the Netziv would learn 16 hours a day, every single day. But what was unique about the Netziv, and especially in the way he ran the Volozhin Yeshiva, is he would start off every day learning Chumash with the Talmidim, with Rashi, and his Sefer Hamek Davar was based and predicated on these Shiurim that he gave. Now, why is that so unusual? Usually in a yeshiva, the curriculum is limited to the Gemara, the Talmud. In Volozhin, the Netziv expanded it, and let me explain. There are three types of yeshivas. Yeshiva number one, a boy is expected to come in, to have learned the sugya with the Rishonim, and the Rosh Yeshiva will come in and say Chidushim. If he doesn't have Chidushim, they won't learn that sugya. So you can learn Yivamis, and they'll jump around from sugya to sugya. That's the first type of yeshiva. That was not Volozhin. Next type of yeshiva. The Rosh Yeshiva reads through the whole Masechta, but he'll focus on certain points, and he'll highlight certain. So if you're learning Subis, okay, you'll learn Daf Beis, you'll learn the sugya of Avelos, you'll learn the sugya of P'sukei Shel Nichale, you'll learn Svek Svekel, you'll jump around in terms of, you learn everything Kasei there, but you focus on different highlight spots. And they would only do that to Nashim and Nazikin, not Volozhin. In Volozhin, they started from the beginning of Shas, and they learned every blot, Be'iyun, the same way. There was no such thing as highlights. There was no concept of focus. The whole Torah was equally valuable and precious, and digging it, one could dig into. Now, as radical as that was at the time, the Netziv revolutionized that and expanded that. What do I mean? The Netziv expanded curriculum to the Sifra, the Sifri, the Mechilta, the Shiltais. The Netziv's teaching encompassed Kol HaTorah Kula. And he did this for 40 years. And in his Hakdama, his introduction to the Hamek Davar, to the Hamek Shaila, he has something called Kidmas Ha'emek. And he says there are two parts of the Torah. There's the Eish and there's the Das. The Das is the cut line halacha. Mutter, asr, better not to do, it's okay to do. But the Eish is the pilpul, the fire of it. And there always has to be a balance between the knowledge of the material and the das, and the balance with the Eish. This was the difference between Yehuda and Levi. Levi was a poisek, Yoru Mishpatach Liakov, but Yehuda was the mechoikek, the lawgiver. He dug into the details and the depths of every single aspect of Torah. You have the same thing with Bnei Eretz Yisrael and Bnei Bavel. In Eretz Yisrael, they had the Lishkas Hagazes. They cut the halacha. But in Bavel, they delved deep into the Shakla V'Tarya. And this was the expansive method of learning of the Netziv, where he made Kol HaTorah Kula part of the curriculum. In fact, the Netziv says that this was his unique approach. Now, when we understand the tremendous amelos of the Netziv, from the age of a young 13 and a half years old, where he was learning so many hours a day and writing and teaching Kol HaTorah Kula, he would sign off all of his letters, Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, Ha'amos Ba'avoida, laden with the great avoida of Limud HaTorah, Amelos B'Torah, and Harbatzas HaTorah. No one like the Netziv took upon themselves this entire gamut of Kol HaTorah to give over to Klal Yisrael, and he carried the yeshiva for many, many decades. Zechusay Yagein Aleinu. This is a great contribution of Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin Nifter Chaf Ches Av Nisbakesh B'Yeshiva Shalmala Chaf Ches Menachem Av Shnas Taf Reish Nun Gimel 1893. Zechusay Yagein Aleinu. What an awesome location, the kever of Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. Maran, Reb Chaim Halevi Soloveitchik ben Hagoyin, Maran Reb Yosef Dev Halevi, the son of the Beis Halevi, first Ram in Yeshivas Volozhin, and then the Avbezin of Brisk and Lita. His sons write about him that Hayarabban Uma'oron Shal Yisrael B'Molei Muvan Hamilam. He was the quintessential and unquestioned leader of the Jewish people. Vehemet Talmidim La'alafim. He established thousands of students B'chol Mekoymes HaGolos, throughout the Golos. His methodology of learning, probably more than anyone else, influenced the way they learn in yeshivas today. Reb Chaim created what we call the idea of Shnei Dinim, that in Talmudic process there can be a certain idea or halacha, and there could be two reasons for it. For example, the classic question and answer of Chaim is a contradiction in the Rambam, where the Rambam writes in Hilchos Tefillah, Perek Dalet, Halacha Aleph, that there are five things that are ma'akev tefillah. One of them is purity of one's hands and having one's erva covered, and that the place should be clean, and kavana. So that it seems like, according to the Rambam, kavana is absolutely necessary for davening, and if you don't have it, you're not yotzei. And on the other hand, in Perek Yud Halacha Aleph, the Rambam paskins that if you're mechavein just for the first bracha of Shemona Esrei, you're yotzei. So that seems to indicate that kavana is not absolutely ma'akev, only for the first bracha. So Reb Chaim famously says there are two dinim of kavana. There's one basic din of kavana. You have to be cognizant you're standing before Hashem. That has to be present throughout the entire Shemona Esrei. If that is not present even in the last bracha, you're not yotzei. So the baseline kavana, that you're cognizant you're standing before the king, that must be present throughout the Shemona Esrei. But Reb Chaim says there's another din of kavana. There's another element of required kavana, namely the meaning of the words, thinking about the meaning of the words. That din of kavana is only needed for the first bracha of Shemona Esrei. That's a classic example of Shnei Dinim. Chazon Ish doesn't agree with that. Chazon Ish learns the Rambam, that the Rambam first says you need to have kavana, and later on in Perek Yud, the Rambam is saying when you need to have kavana. It's only needed for the first bracha. But Reb Chaim would say there are two distinct elements of kavana. Everybody knows the Svarim of Chaim Soloveitchik is the backbone of methodology in the yeshiva world. But what I want to focus on is something else entirely. As much as Reb Chaim excelled in learning, he excelled in chesed, in kindness. Amazingly, Reb Chaim's house was a Rishus Harabim, was like a public domain. Somebody once said to the Grizz, is it true that Reb Chaim's house is a public domain? He said, no, it was worse than a public domain. What would happen is, literally people off the streets would come, go into Reb Chaim's bed, and they would say, move over, and Reb Chaim would have to get off his own bed. In 1895, there was a terrible fire in Brisk, and Reb Chaim would not rest until he helped everybody rebuild their lives. And during that time, Reb Chaim did not sleep in his own house. He slept on the floor in the shul. And his family pressured him, come sleep at home a little bit. He would say, I cannot sleep in my own bed, knowing that many Yidden don't have a roof over their heads. Somebody once asked Reb Chaim, what's the role of a Rav? What's a Rav for? To paskin shailas? No, that's an Av Bezdin. To give Shiurim? That's a Maggid Shir. What's the role of a Rav? Reb Chaim would say, the word Rav only appears once. V'Rav Chesed. V'Rav Chesed. The role of a Rav is to do a lot of kindness. Lo and behold, Hashgacha had it that on the top line in the inscription of Reb Chaim's kever, Rabbeinu Hagadol Rav HaChesed, and then Sar HaTorah. That was the title that Reb Chaim was given himself, where the world understood that as great as he was in Limud HaTorah, he was equally excelled in V'Rav Chesed, the abundant kindness that he did for his brethren, for his community, and for the Jewish people. Zechusay Yagin Aleinu, he was Nifter, Chaf Aleph, Menachem Av, Taf Reish, Ayin Ches, 1918, in Atvask, which was a resort area outside of Warsaw. Zechusay Yagin Aleinu. Okay, it's a great zechus to be at the kever of the Chemdas Shloimei, the Chachmas Shloimei, Reb Shloima Zalman Lifshitz. He was born in 1765. He was nifter in 1839. Rabbi Kivega writes about him, I am not even worthy to question in my mind his psukim, even if I wanted to be machmir. The Shal Shechuvas Chassam Sofer says he's Go'in Yisrael. I want to tell you a little bit about him. He was born in Posen. His father, Rabbi Yitzchak, was a leader in the city. In 1804, he becomes the Rav in Nashlask. Nashlask is a city, an area near Warsaw. In 1819, he's appointed the Rav in Praga. Now, Praga is not Prague. It is important to know. Praga is an area, a district in Warsaw, separated from Warsaw proper by a river. So there's Warsaw proper, and there's Praga, which is a district of Warsaw, separated by a river. Now, 1821 comes. Until 1821, they never had a chief rabbi in Warsaw. In 1821, they're trying to appoint a chief rabbi in Warsaw, the Rosh HaKehillah, Rav Hirsch Danziger. He agrees with the other heads of the Kehillah that they're going to appoint Rabbi Aryeh Leib Tzins. We're going to go, Bez Hashem, go to his kever. However, they get a letter from Rabbi Kiveger. Rabbi Kiveger writes as follows. Now, Rabbi Kiveger was one of the greatest anovim, one of the most humble men, but he felt he needed to voice his opinion on this matter. He says, I know this city wants to appoint Rabbi Aryeh Leib Tzins. I don't want to take away the respect of this guy. However, what the people of Warsaw need, their various opinions, their various personalities, the Rav is going to have to be mavatel to the needs of the people. Therefore, I recommend appointing Reb Shlomo Zalman Lifshitz. He's the Abbezin of Praga. He'll have more of a hashpah on the people for each individual, because Rabbi Aryeh Leib is going to be very immersed benigla uvenistar. But the Chemdas Shloimei knows how to make Zman Torah L'chud, Zman Tzibor L'chud. And he would be a more appropriate leader. They followed the advice of Rabbi Kiveger, and they appointed the Chemdas Shloimei as the Rav. Now, this is a story printed in the Chud HaMeshulash. Chazon Ish said every Jewish home has to have Chud HaMeshulash. Chud HaMeshulash is the official biography of Chassam Sofer, Ksav Sofer, Reb Shimon Sofer. I'm sorry. And of course, Rabbi Kiveger. Rabbi Kiveger, Chassam Sofer, Ksav Sofer. It's an amazing story. Reb Shlomo Eger. Reb Shlomo Eger is the son of Rabbi Kiveger. His father-in-law, Reb Tzvi Hirsch Tzinsimer, left in his ethical will, in his will, that whoever names the first baby after me, I leave them 40,000 ruble. Okay? So here you have the father-in-law of Shlomo Eger, the Reb Tzvi Hirsch. Whoever names the kid Tzvi Hirsch, the kid gets 40,000 ruble. So Reb Shlomo Eger had the first boy. He names the kid Tzvi Hirsch. The baby died within 30 days. Reb Shlomo Eger says, good, it belongs to the baby, and now I inherited the baby. I get the shver's money. Okay? So they go to, they bring the question to the Chemdas Shloimei. Chemdas Shloimei says, I need 30 days to deliberate about this question. He comes back after 30 days. and he says to Rav Shlomo Eiger, sorry, the money doesn't go to you. Start over, the next child that's born. Rav Shlomo Eiger wasn't happy about this. He says, maybe you want to discuss this with my father, Rabbi Akiva Eiger. I know he loves you. I'm sure you would value his opinion. So the Chemda Shlomo said, let me tell you a story about the Rebbe Reb Shmalka, the Rebbe Reb Heschel. We're going to visit him in Krakow, Motzei Shabbos. One year, the Rebbe Reb Heschel was a young boy, and he stole his father's afikoman. So when the father wants the afikoman back, the Rebbe Reb Heschel says, as a little kid, Tati, I'll give you back the afikoman. I want silk garments. Silk garments, I mean, that's like a kid asking for, a Mercedes, What do you mean silk garments? The father said, look, what could I do? I need the afikoman back. Give me the afikoman, I'll give you the silk garments. Fine. So now the father has afikoman, he's giving it out to the kids. He turns to his son Heschel, he says, I'm not giving it to you. He says, why not? He said, I'll give it to you on condition you're moichel the silk garments. So the Rebbe Heschel looks at him, he says, Dad, I knew you would do that. That's why I gave you a decoy afikoman. I'm still holding on to the real afikoman, and I'm giving it to you on condition that you give me silk garments and don't make any tanoim. Says the Chemda Shlomo, I knew you were going to tell me that I should ask Rabbi Akiva Eiger first. I already asked him. Here's the psak. He agrees with me. So this was the chachma of the Chemda Shlomo. Now I want to tell you a little lumdus on the Chemda Shlomo. We know there's a concept, oines, rachmana, patre. If someone has an extenuating circumstance, they're exempt. The question is in Gemara and Ksubis, we'll go inside. The Gemara and Ksubis talks about the sugya of ein oines begitin. Do you remember that sugya? Ein oines, you can come in. Ein oines begitin. If somebody says to their wife, here's the document of divorce, on condition only if I don't return within 30 days. And the guy wanted to return, but he was not able to return. So the question is, why does oines play a role in this situation? Doesn't oines rachmana patre mean that if you're an oines, it's not your fault? It's not your fault. Okay, that's when it's a matter of punishment, not when it's a matter of not coming. You said, if I don't come, it should be a get. So you didn't come, it doesn't matter why you didn't come. So the Chemda Shlomo says, what's the lumdus? What's the mechanism of oines? The mechanism of oines is, if the reason you didn't do something was because of extenuating circumstances, we don't attribute that to you. It's like it just happened in the world in general. The mechanism of oines is not, it's not your fault so you won't get punished. It's if the reason you did or didn't do something is because of extenuating circumstance, then we say the thing happened, but it's not connected to you. It's not attributed to you. That's the mechanism of oines. We learn it out from the pasuk ulanara loisasa davar, that if a woman is violated, we don't punish her, not because it's a mitigating factor. It's because when something is done and it was not your fault, we don't attribute it to you. This is a lumdus of the Chemda Shlomo. Zchus hayagin aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Amen. Okay, we're at the kever of a tremendous personality, Reb Aryeh Leib Tzins. Moreno Reb Aryeh Leib ben Ramosha, the author of Get Mekushar, many svarim that were already published, and we're going to talk about the promise that he made before his Petira. His first sefer he wrote at 25 years old, the sefer Yalas Chen, and it says over there it was composed by one of the young men of Pinchov. Great in Torah and in Chachma. Now, Reb Mordechai Bennett wrote about him in that same year when he was 25. Harav Hamar Hagadal Hacharif Muflag Asher Liboy Kalev Ari. His heart was like the heart of a lion. That was his name, Aryeh Leib. The Rabbi Yehuda had a policy. He did not give haskamas to Svarim, but he made an exception for Rabbi Aryeh Leib. That's a rule, all people say, but that's my rule. Okay, it's a good rule to have. It doesn't mean it can't change sometimes. Again, if it's your rule, not if it's a halacha. Not only that, Rabbi Aryeh Leib was so close to Rabbi Yehuda, he was me'oichel shulchanay of the Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Aryeh Leib frequented the table of the Rabbi Yehuda. He was a Rav in Platsk. He had some responsibilities together with the Chemda Shloimeh here in Warsaw. He was the Rebbe of Chiddushei Harim. Rabbi Avram Michachnav, Rabbi Yaakov Gesundheit. There's a famous story that a woman was having a difficult time giving birth. So Rabbi Leib says, I have a very simple solution, and you could try this. I'm going to ask a question on the Gemara, I'm going to give a teretz, and by answering the Gemara, it will help the woman give birth. It's a tried and proven method, unchartered, untapped in. Now, in his Sefer Halacha, Meshivas Nefesh, Chelek Aleph, Siman Lamed Hey, he utilized, there was a woman who was an aguna. He utilized the dream somebody had about the whereabouts of the husband as a factor in permitting the woman to get married. Because he felt the dream was somewhat verifiable, he used this as a factor to help the woman get married. He wrote in his dying words, and he wrote this in the Hakdama of the Sefer Birchas Hashir, that Mi sheyishtadel b'hadvasasan, anyone who helps publish his Sfarim, Yeloi hamechaber lemelatz, the mechaber will be a melatz for them, Yeloi zechus, if they are able to. He was nifter on a Monday, Gimel Iyar, Tav Kuf Tzadik, Gimel Lamed, in the year what? Tav Kuf Tzadik Lamed Gimel. So that's the year 1833. Over here we have 1833. Zechutza Yogan Aleinu V'Al Kol Yisrael. Okay, we're at the kever of the Tferes Yaakov, Rav Yaakov Gesundheit, Harav Hagoyin Ha'amiti, Asher Hirbert Tzar B'Ram Kol Yomav, Hemid Talmidim Harbe. He established many Talmidim, Rabbanim, Umuflagit Torah, who were excellent in Torah. Rabbi Yaakov, he's the author of Tferes Yaakov. It's Sefer HaMasechta Gittin. It's a Sefer HaMasechta Chulin. He, as a young man, finished the Shach on Yerodea and on Shulchan Aruch at age 18. Tferes Yaakov is also on Choshen Mishpat. He led the yeshiva here in Warsaw for 42 years and served as the chief rabbi from 1870 to 1874. Next to him is buried Rabbi Avram ben Reb Leibel Moel, who is the son-in-law of Rabbi Meir Simcha of Dvinsk. They're buried side by side. Okay, this is the Kever Achim of thousands of Kedoshim of the Warsaw Ghetto. We're headed to the city of Sochotzew. Our great-grandfather was actually the last Rav of the city of Sochotzew, and he had the opportunity to come to America and to save his life. The Aguda was going to create a position for him. He was going to be the chief rabbi of the United States of America, and he didn't want to leave his Kehillah. He was taken to the Warsaw Ghetto. He was killed in the Warsaw Ghetto. He died in the Warsaw Ghetto. And this is the Kever Achim of thousands of Kedoshim of the Warsaw Ghetto. So with your permission, we're going to make a Kel Mole. And I don't have the Nusach. For the Kedoshim, we're going to mention the name of the Zayda.
Okay. This is for 6 million. It's not specific for the Warsaw Ghetto. Is that okay?
I'll tweak it. Help Malay Rachamim, Sheikhin Bamiroimim. Hamtzei Menuchane Chayna, Kanfei Ashchina, Bimalois Kedoshim Utoirim, Kezayar Rakia Masirim. Es Nishmoiseyem, Shel Alfei Kedoshim, Shel Ghetto Varsha, Uvesoicham, Es Nishmas, Rabbi Yehuda ben Abraham Yitzchak, Ves Nishmoiseyem Shel Bnei Yisrael Anoshim Noshim Yuladim v'Yuladois Shenehergu Shenishchatu Shenisrufu Shenechneku Shenitbu v'Shenikbru Chayim B'dei Hanatzim v'Yizrem Yimach Shemam Bavur shanu mispalim lionish ma'aseihem. L'chein bal harachamim. Yasireim b'seisek nafav li'olamim. V'yitzrar b'tzar achayim es nishma'aseihem. V'gan eden teimenu chasam. Adonai hu nachalasam. V'yanuch b'shalom ha'mishkavaham. V'naymar amen. Okay, good afternoon everybody. Shalom Aleichem. We are headed now to Ir Ve'em B'Yisrael. What Polish Jew does not recognize the following name? Sochotzew. Sochotzew was recognized far beyond its borders. Even though there were hundreds of towns throughout Poland, but there was something unique about Sochotzew. The court, the Chatzerim of the Rebbes certainly contributed. The Rebbes being the Avnei Nezer, Rabbi Avram Bornstein, his son Rav Shmuel Bornstein. But traditionally, historically, Sochotzew always had success with its Rabbanim. Even though it was a small town, they had Rabbanim like Hagoin, Reb Moshe. Reb Moshe was the brother of the Shach. They had the great Rav Meir Ashkenazi, the author of the Panameiros, the Goin, Reb Leibish Charif Halpern. The Yid HaKadosh was in Sochotzew, and it's assumed that Rabbunim of Parsha also came to Sochotzew to learn with the Yid HaKadosh. One of the reasons why Sochotzew was so successful in its flourishing spiritually is that it allowed its Rabbanim to conduct the yeshiva in Sochotzew, and the whole city participated in supporting the Bachrim of the yeshiva. So it became the culture of the city to support Torah, to establish Torah, and this was a unique custom where the Rabbanim of the city were allowed to conduct the yeshiva, and the whole city participated. But when Rabbi Avremel is Rabbi Avram Bornstein, when he came to Sochotzew, he infused a force of attraction. All the sharp minds throughout Poland are attracted to Sochotzew. What was special about Rabbi Avremel? Rabbi Avram Bornstein was the son-in-law of the Kotzker. Kotsk Chasidus is a unique Chasidus. It minimized, it trivialized the costume, the externalities. In Kotsk, it was always about search for truth, adherence to truth, self-introspection, not fooling oneself. It was sort of a Chasidus like the Musar movement. It was a very rare form of Chasidus, a very grueling and demanding form of Chasidus. And then Rabbi Avram's method of learning, where Rav Avram took the sharpness and the scholarship of Rabbi Meir, the Chidushei Harim, and the Avnei Nezer was able to combine the Musar, the search for truth of Kotsk, and the analysis of Ger, and this produced a combination of unique Chasidus mixed with Limud HaTorah. It was one of the most vibrant, alive, and elevating forms of Avodas Hashem, the combination of Torah and Chasidus that was in Sochotzew. The greatest minds throughout Poland came to Sochotzew. For example, Rabbi Yoav Yeshua, the Chelkas Yoav, the Kinskarav. Rabbi Yosef Engel came to learn from the Avnei Nezer of Sochotzew. Rabbi Yitzchak Feigenbaum, the Av Bezdin of Warsaw. Even Litvaks came to Sochotzew to learn from the Avnei Nezer. They, so to speak, put aside the fact that he was Chassidosh. They were forced to acknowledge that he was the greatest of all the Gaonim. And what's interesting is, in the same way Rabbi Yitzchak Elchanan of Kovna became the acclaimed Posek in the Lithuanian world, so too the Avnei Nezer became the Posek in Poland. So this is a little bit of the background of Sochotzew, but it became almost a brand. So traditionally, if you went to a Rebbe, the Rebbe would spend time with you, hear you out, talk to you, The Avnei Nezer was very swift with those who sought his advice. He says every minute that it takes away from his learning is something he can't give up. So he established a Hasidic court, but it was really geared for Loimdim and those who were very knowledgeable in Torah. However, if a Chassid came and the Chassid, so to speak, felt like he wasn't valued enough because he did not excel in Limud Torah, the Avnei Nezer said, look, don't feel bad, don't be hurt. He would say that if you conduct yourself honorably and honestly, it's like you're learned. This was the supreme value in Sochotzew. It was a strive for truth, both in personal conduct and in Limud Torah, and it was the envy of all of Poland. So they began to establish Sochotzew Shtiblach throughout Poland. People didn't even know anything about Sochotzew. All they knew was, if you want honesty in conduct, honesty in discipline, honesty in learning, then you needed to establish a Sochotzew style shtibel. So for example, if you were looking for a son-in-law, or you had a mischievous son and he needed a friend, or you needed a rebbe, the best place to search was always in the Sochotzew shtibel, to have some kind of flavor and taste of the style of learning and discipline that they conducted themselves in Sochotzew. By the way, we mentioned the yeshiva in Sochotzew, but in the end of Rabbi Avramel's life, he was very ill. We're going to see he had very weak lungs. He had a very terrible cough. But when Rabbi Avram's son, the Shem Yishmael, took over, and especially when he employed Rabbi Aryeh Tzvi Frommer, the Kuzha Glover Goin, the yeshiva in Sochotzew became one of the most popular yeshivas in Poland. Sochotzew and Sochotzew life was really destroyed in World War I, and at that point, Reb Shmuel, the Shem Yishmael, moved the court to Lodz and later to Zagiars, but they always called it Sochotzew. Doesn't matter where they went, they could have been in any city in Poland. It always retained the trademark name and the branding of Sochotzew. After Reb Shmuel passed away, Reb Davidel, the oldest son of Reb Shmuel, became the Rebbe, and he was in different cities. First he was in Wizograd, and later in Atwak. But wherever this Hasidus moved, it always maintained the name Sochotzew, which was synonymous and reflected the unique combination innovated by the Avnei Nezer, Rabbi Avram Barnstein, who combined the rigorous self-discipline of Kutsk and his brilliant Talmudic analysis, and this became one of the most vibrant brands of Chasidus in all of Poland. It's Chasidus Sochotzew. We're going to go to the Makom Menucha of the Avnei Nezer and the Shem Yishmael shortly. Okay, it's a great schos. We're here in Sochotzew. This was the ancient cemetery, the Jewish cemetery in Sochotzew. It was completely destroyed by the Nazis in World War II. Every single headstone was taken and thrown into the river, including the oil of the two Rebbes and their headstones. This was then turned into, it laid as a barren field. During communism, it was used as a soccer field and then a garbage dump. Many Hasidim tried, they came here to try to locate the kever of the Avnei Nezer and the Shem Yishmael with no luck. For how long? For 50 years. 1991, after the fall of communism, Rabbi Yehuda Vidavsky, a Sochotzewer Chassid from Lodz, he was in Tel Aviv. He came here, he tried to restore the Ohel. He petitioned to build a fence around the perimeter of the walls of where the cemetery was. They built the walls. He invited Rabbi Aaron Yisrael Bornstein, the son of the Shem Yishmael in Tel Aviv, to come here to try to remember where the kever was. Rabbi Aaron Yisrael recalled that it was 35 meters from the entrance. So Rabbi Vidavsky hired Polish workers to dig out the area. they found nothing. He hired someone who used machines to scan the area for bones. Nothing. He didn't give up. He searched the neighborhood. He found an old Sochotzew lady who grew up here. He brought her to the cemetery, and she says, "Why are you searching here? It's over there." And they started to dig where this lady said. They discovered the wooden board where the Avnei Nezer was buried. Next to it, they found a piece of the wood where the Shem Yishmael was buried. They restored the graves. They built this oihel. There's a monument here to commemorate the Jews of Sochotzew before the war. There were 5,000 Jews in the community here. When I was here 5 years ago, there was 1 Jew in the community, and today there are no Jews in the entire city of Sochotzew. Okay, we're here at Makom Menuchasai of the Rebbe of Sochotzew, the Avnei Nezer, Rabbi Avram Bornstein, 1839 to 1910. Kvoid Kedushas Maran Adonai Marin Rabbeinu Hagoyin HaKadosh Sar HaTorah V'yiras Hashem Tahira Ma'oron Shal Yisrael. Rabbi Avram of Sochotzew, the author of Eglei Tal Avnei Nezer. It's interesting, now he's known as the Avnei Nezer. He was not known as the Avnei Nezer B'chayav. He left over 7 volumes of manuscripts of responsa, and it was published by his son, the Shem Yishmael. And the name that the Shem Yishmael used, Avnei Nezer, is because his father was Zev Nachum. So Nezer, Zev Nachum, and the Avnei Nezer was the son-in-law of the Kutzker, and we're going to talk about how that shidduch was made. Amazingly, he writes in the Hakdama of the Eglei Tal that he was a descendant of the Shach, the Shach on Yordea. In Avnei Nezer, Ibn Ezra, Simon Kuf Lamed Hey, he writes he was a descendant of the Ramah. He writes in Avnei Nezer, Simon Reish Lamed Tes, he was a descendant of the Masorei Keach, so that means he's a descendant of Rashi as well. His father, Rav Zev Nachum Bornstein, wrote the Sefer Agudas Ezov, and he was a Kutzker Chassid. And the Kutzker Rebbe told him, "You know why you're a Zoicha to have a son like the Avnei Nezer? Because you spend your whole day Purim learning Torah. In that merit, I always tell my kids, everybody goes around collecting on Purim. The best thing you could do on Purim is to learn. In the merit that the Rav Zev Nachum spent the day learning Torah, he was Zoicha to have a son, the Avnei Nezer. Rav Zev Nachum takes his son, Rav Avram, when he was 12 years old, to meet the Kutzker Rebbe. The Kutzker Rebbe is so impressed with him, he then immediately, at that meeting, the Avnei Nezer became engaged to the daughter of the Kutzker Rebbe, the Kutzker Rebbe's daughter, Sarah Tzina. And they stayed in Kutsk for 7 years. They have 1 son, Shmuel. He was born in 1857. What's amazing is that when the Avnei Nezer was in Kutsk, he spent 2 hours a night learning, 2 hours a night sleeping. He only slept for 2 hours a night. After the Kutzker died, so now the Avnei Nezer is looking, he still wants to have a Rebbe. So he became a chassid of his uncle, the Chidush Harim. Then he became an Alexander chassid. And then when the Alexander Rebbe passed away, now the Avnei Nezer, so to speak, is in a position where he has to take on the Rabbanas. But his Ikar Avodah was teaching the Talmidim. Now, if you're familiar with the yeshiva system, how long a day does a Rosh Yeshiva give shiur for per day? Sometimes they give a shiur even once every few weeks or once a week. But the most, they'll give a shiur an hour a day, an hour and a half a day. The Avnei Nezer would give shiur every day for 8 hours to his Talmidim. He taught 8 hours for his Talmidim. He did not have time to write anything. It was only later on in life when he was so weak and he couldn't teach his Talmidim and he wanted to somehow be Mekayim the mitzvah of Harbatzas Torah, so he wrote the Eglei Tal to Mekayim the mitzvah of Harbatzas Torah. By the way, people started coming to the Avnei Nezer as a Rebbe. And he says like this, people want to get out of being drafted in the army. That's a piece of cake to get somebody out of that. All I need to do is learn. I'll ask a question, I'll give a teretz, and that automatically will mystically get somebody out of the army. But then they want refuos. Refuos is much more difficult. I don't have koyach to do that. Now, he served as the Rebbe in Sochotzew for 27 years. As mentioned, that he was not known as Avnei Nezer during his lifetime. He only published the Eglei Tal. I want to share with you 3 classic chidushim of the Avnei Nezer. By the way, it is said that he had the soul of the Maral of Prague. One chidush. There's a great dilemma. What do you do the night of Pesach? You know, the Seder is running late, and halachically, according to the Ramah, you can't eat the afikomen after Chatzos, because according to Rabbi Glatstein ben Azariah, the afikomen has to be eaten by Chatzos, and then after that, if you're going to eat the afikomen, you won't be able to eat the meal after that. Rabbi Kiva says you could eat the afikomen the whole night. So the Avnei Nezer has an incredible chap. You know the chap of the Avnei Nezer, an amazing chiddush. The Avnei Nezer makes a t'nai. He says if you see the Suda, if you see the Seders going late, you could say like this. Chatzos is in 30 minutes. I didn't even eat the meal yet. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to eat the afikomen now. After I eat the afikomen, I'm going to wait until Chatzos. How could I eat? No, according to Rabbi Glatstein ben Azariah, that you have to eat the afikomen by Chatzos, the prohibition of eating after the afikomen is only until Chatzos. So I'll wait till Chatzos, then I'll eat the Suda, and then I'll eat another afikomen. So what we call it is miman nefshach. If the halacha is like Rabbi Glatstein ben Azariah, I was yotzi with the first afikomen. If the halacha is like Rabbi Kiva, I'm yotzi with the second afikomen. Then the Avnei Nezer has what we call a life-saving chiddush. The Avnei Nezer writes in the Hakdama to the Eglei Tal that many are familiar, that the Zohar HaKadosh writes that there is one sin that there is no atonement for. One cannot do tshuva for. The sin of moitzi zera levatala, of wasting seed, the Zohar says you cannot repent. There's no way to correct it. And many find that very depressing and demoralizing. And the Avnei Nezer says a very amazing chiddush, that somebody who learns Torah be'iyon, with great amelos, meaning not just to learn, but to put in strenuous effort, and they really use their mind, it's a complete kapara even for that sin. Why? He says, according to the Zohar, the zera is created in the mayach. So by using the mayach, it's mechaper for that sin. Even scientifically, biologically, they've now discovered that it's created through the pituitary gland. So what Kabbalah knew from Mimos Moshe Rabbeinu, this is confirmed. I'll tell you one more chiddush, and this really captures the essence of the Avnei Nezer and Sochotzew Chasidus in general. The Avnei Nezer says that there's a great error. People think that if someone is very into learning and someone really enjoys learning, then it mitigates their learning, it minimizes their learning. It's not really Torah Lishma, because they get an enjoyment, a satisfaction out of it. However, says Avnei Nezer, just the opposite. The main Torah Lishma, the main Torah that changes a person, the main Torah that elevates a person, is a Torah that you enjoy and that you learn besimcha. And this really epitomizes what attracted all of Polish Jewry to Sochotzew Chasidus. It was the Torah mitoch simcha that was invigorated through the Avnei Nezer. Zechusai yagein aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, what a great zechus it is to be here in Sochotzew. Who could have even imagined to have such a wondrous privilege? We're at now the kever of the Shem Mishmuel. We mentioned here it's Rabbi Yehuda Vidavsky was the one who restored this area and was able to find the Kfarim of the Avnei Nezer and part of the Shem Mishmuel, and he restored this area. The Shem Mishmuel was the only son of Rabbi Avram and Sarat Sina. By the way, my grandmother, Aleha Shalom, her father was the last Rav of the city of Sochotzew. My grandmother's name, Zechron was also Tzina. So you see it's a Sochotzewer name. And he was very close with his father. He had a very strong bond with his father. So Reb Shmuel, even though he had many children, he always considered himself his father's Talmud. When he married, when the Avnei Nezer's son married, he married the daughter of Rabbi Eliezer Lipman Litmanowitz. Now you all know, the minhag is, when you get married, who do you move in with? The shver, You move into the in-laws. No, not the Shem Shmuel. He moved in with his father. He had 2 sons, David. David was a Mamala Makam. Rav David Sochotzew, and Chanoy Chenuch. And he owned a wine store that was run by an associate. This is amazing. The Avnei Nezer had tremendous ahavas Eretz Yisrael. So for example, many discuss the issue, were we allowed to return to Eretz Yisrael by force? What about the Gemara in Ksubis? What about the Shalosh Shvuos? The Avnei Nezer has a tshuva why the Shalosh Shvuos are not relevant anymore. You know that? The Avnei Nezer wrote a tshuva that we are not bound by them. They're not binding. And in 1891, the Avnei Nezer sent the Shem Yishmuel to Eretz Yisrael to buy land, to re-establish Sochotzew Chasidus in Eretz Yisrael. But the Turks would not sell any land, and the Shem Yishmuel had to come home. In 1910, the Avnei Nezer died. The Shem Yishmuel establishes the Yeshiva Beis Avram, and the yeshiva attracted hundreds of Talmidim, and especially when he brought in Rabbi Aryeh Tzvi Frommer to be the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshiva Beis Avram. Ma'elta Zeda was a Talmud in that yeshiva. He learned by the Kuzha Glavar Gaon, the Eretz Tzvi. World War I breaks out. The Shem Yishmuel was arrested in Germany as a spy. He was not able to return to Sochotzew, and he had to re-establish Sochotzew in Lodz. In 1915, the Germans came, they destroyed the city of Sochotzew. In 1926, the Shem Yishmuel's health worsened. He moved to Atwak, near Warsaw. He died at 70 years old, and he's brought to burial right next to his father, the Avnei Nezer, and he's succeeded by Rav Davidel, the 3rd Rebbe of Sochotzew. If I could share with you a thought of the Shem Yishmuel that he brings from his grandfather, the Kutzker Rebbe. The Shem Yishmuel brings, think about it, where does Malchus Beis David come from? We didn't groom it from within the Jewish people. We had to go to Moav. Why does Malchus Beis David have to come from Moav? So the Shem Yishmuel says from the Kutzker, because Malchus is when one individual is elevated above the rest. That's not something that's inherent in the Jewish people, because we're all Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad. We needed to import it. Who did we import it from? Moav. The Klipa of Moav, the Navi says, Hine Geya Moav Geya Ma'od. They're very arrogant. So we had to adopt the Midah of majesty. We had to take it from Moav and utilize it for the Malchus Beis David, but it was not something that was germane to the Jewish people. This is what the Shem Yishmuel brings in the name of his grandfather, the Kutzker. And the Shem Yishmuel's Torah also is a very unique blend of Chasidus, Kabbalah, Lamdus, which personified also the very vibrant approach of combining Torah and Chasidus that thrived and flourished here in Sochotzew until the Holocaust. And all the Yidden that lived in the city, may Hashem avenge their deaths, and we should be zeicha to see Harninu le'lokim amoy kidam avadav yikaim v'nakam yashiv letzarav v'chiper ad masay amoy zechusam yagen elinu. This is a monument for the 3rd Rebbe of Sochotzew, Reb Davidel of Sochotzew, the Chastei David, the Av Bezdin of Visegrad and Tomashov. Again, he had to relocate Sochotzew Chasidus to other cities because Sochotzew, as a great center of Torah, really ceased after World War I, and it was on the move in terms of the Chasidus. He was the Mamal Makom of Reb Shmuel, the Shem Yishmuel. He was the Talmud Muvak of his grandfather, Reb Avram, the Avnei Nezer. He was a descendant, as we mentioned, of the Kutzker Rebbe and of the Tver Shlomo Radomsk. He died on Ches Kislev, Tuf Shin Gimel, 1943, and in the Warsaw ghetto, and we don't know where he's buried. So they just put up a commemorative plaque for him, but this is not Makom Menuchasai. Again, he's the 3rd Rebbe of the Sochotzew dynasty. As we mentioned, before the war there were 5,000 Jews in Sochotzew. After the war, nobody left. The Jews of Sochotzew and its surroundings have lived here for 600 years. They were annihilated by the Nazis 1939 to 1945, including our immediate family. My grandmother grew up here in Sochotzew, very close by to here. Her sister, all of her siblings, her parents were rounded up. They were taken to the Warsaw ghetto, and with the exception of my grandmother and her sister, her whole family was annihilated by the Nazis. We're going to make a Kel Malei Rachamim for the Yehuda Sochotzew. Then I'll show you on the other side how even today they continue to vandalize this memorial. Kel Malei Rachamim Shoichein B'Amiroimim Hamtzei Menucha Nechayna Kanfei Ashchina B'Malois Kedoshim U'Tahirim Kezayar Harakiah Masirim Es Nishmas Rabbi Yehuda ben Avram Yitzchak Ben Arasha Bas Yishaya Nata Shmuel Hirsch Friday Feika from Alas from Moshe Ben Avram Yitzchak V'Soich Shar HaKehila Shenehargu Shenishchatu Shenesefu V'Shenisva Kiddush Hashem Bidei Hamaratzchem HaGermanim Anatzim V'Yizreim Mishor Ha'amim Lachein Bal HaRachamim Yasirem B'Seis K'nafav L'Yoylamim V'Yitzar B'Tzar HaChayim Es Nishma Yiseihem Adonaihu Nachal Asam B'Gan Eden Tehi Menuchasam V'Yamdu L'Goyralam L'Keitz Hayamin V'Naimar Amen. So you'll see around here, if you look up this monument, they write that it was vandalized with a swastika and they fixed it, but apparently it was vandalized again. So you see that they are very happy to keep the status quo here in the city of Sochotzew. Come around.
Wow, look at they threw them into the river.
That they found, yeah. We're in the area where the Jewish cemetery in Kutna was. Up the hill, there was a monument commemorating those who were buried here in this cemetery. And the legend has it that at this tree is the burial of one of the great Poskim and Gedolim in all of Polish Jewry, Rabbi Yisrael Yehoshua Trunk, known as Rabbi Yeshua Mikutna, or his full name is Rabbi Yisrael Eliyahu Yehoshua Trunk. Yisrael, he was named after the Baal Shem Tov. Eliyahu, he was named after the Vilna Gaon. Yehoshua, he was named after the Pnei Yehoshua. He had these three eminent names. However, when he signed his name, he left out the word Eliyahu. You'll ask why, but his name was Yisrael Eliyahu Yehoshua. The answer is, if you take the word Yisrael and you put it next to Yehoshua, the last two letters of Yisrael are Aleph Lamed. The first three letters of Eliyahu are Aleph, Lamed, are Yud, Hey Vav, spells Eliyahu. So he didn't have to say Eliyahu. It was already automatically spelled out by connecting Yisrael to Yehoshua. Now I have a special family connection to Rabbi Shmuel Mikutna. My grandfather, my father's father's mother's, my father's 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 mother's father. Okay, so my grandfather, Rav Mordechai Leib Glatstein, his mother's father, his name was Pesach Moshe Goldman. He was a student of Rabbi Shmuel Mikutna in Platsk, and he helped Rabbi Shmuel Mikutna publish his great sefer, Yeshuas Malkai. My friend Rabbi Rafal Ansel Mitzarfas once showed me in the Hakdama of the Yeshuas Malkai. It's brought, why did he call this commentary on the Rambam Yeshuas Malkai? Why Melech? because most commentaries on the Rambam have the word melech in it, because according to the Kabbalah, the Rambam was a Gilgal of Shmuel. Shmuel in the Gemara is called Aryoich, Melech Elasar. Rabbi Shua Mikuna has a famous tshuva written about Tchelas, addressing the Radzina Rebbe who claimed that he found Tchelas. And the question was, well, should we at least perhaps be concerned it might be Tchelas, so maybe we should put it on just in case it is? And Rabbi Shua Mikuna said no. Since most Gedolim say it's not Tchelas, and there's a strong tradition we will not have it until Mashiach comes, Rabbi Shua Mikuna says you're not bound by my view, but in my opinion, one is not required, and it's not necessary in any way to put on Tchelas. This was Rabbi Shua Mikuna's opinion against the Radzina Rebbe, who, by the way, when we were wandering around in the cemetery today, we passed by the kever of the Radzina Rebbe. Now, Rabbi Shua Mikuna, it's very interesting, was a great Ohev Eretz Yisrael, and in 1886, he visited Eretz Yisrael with the goal of encouraging the Yishuv to begin agricultural settlement. And in the Shemitah controversy of 1889, Rabbi Shua Mikuna paskined that it was permitted to sell the land to Goyim during the Shemitah year. He loved Eretz Yisrael so much, he praised the book Drishas Tzion, Rav Tzvi Hersh Kalisher. I want to share with you an amazing Dvar Torah that my father showed me in the writings of Rabbi Shua Mikuna about the Haggadah Shel Pesach. You know, in the Haggadah we say in every generation, B'chol dar v'dar oimdim aleinu l'chaleisenu. Every generation they stand up against us to destroy us. What's the very next passage in the Haggadah? The next passage is Tzei ulamad ma bikesh lavan aram elasos liYaakov Avinu. What does that have to do with what we said before? We just said in every generation they try to destroy us. Now we have to go out and learn what Lavan Harami tried to do to Yaakov Avinu. Says Rabbi Shua Mikuna. Good timing. Says Rabbi Shua Mikuna. You might think the Haggadah is exaggerating. In every generation they tried to destroy us. No, not in every generation. You might say not in a democratic country, not in a country that speaks softly and lovingly to the Jewish people. So maybe only usually in every generation they try to destroy us, but not actually in every generation. Says Rabbi Shua Mikuna, no. Go out and learn what Lavan Harami tried to do to Yaakov Avinu. He sweet-talked him. He said, you don't have to work for me for free. We're not brothers. I'll pay you. So it would seem that Lavan really loved Yaakov Avinu. But in the end of the story, God had to come to Lavan and say, don't do anything to Yaakov Avinu. And Lavan himself admitted, last night God came to me and he told me I shouldn't do anything to you, not good and not bad. So we see from here that when the Haggadah says in every generation they try to destroy us, there are no exceptions. There are no democratic countries that are not part of the prophetic words of the Haggadah Shel Pesach. What could be a more prophetic and compelling comment for our own times? This is what Rabbi Shua Mikuna writes in the Yeshuos Malkai. So again, he was a great Ohev Tzion. He supported the movement of the Chavivei Tzion of Rav Tzvi Hersh Kalisher. And as I mentioned, my great-great-grandfather was a student of his and helped publish his work, Yeshuos Malkai. So we're in the vicinity of the range of the spiritual energy of Rabbi Shua Mikuna, and in this makam, all of our tefillos should be niskabel berachamim uvratzain.
Amen.
Okay, we're on the top of the hill in the location where the cemetery in Kutna was. It says over here, this is the final resting place. That makam menuchasam ha'achroina shel Yehudei Kutna, that was settled in the beginning of the 15th century, and this Beis HaKvaros was established in 1793, and it was used here until 1948. So in this cemetery is buried the great Goin, Rabbi Shua Mikuna. I'll share with you one Dvar Torah that Rabbi Shua Mikuna said. Rabbi Shua Mikuna brought, there's a question how Yaakov Avinu could sell the Bechorah to Esav, but the Bechorah and the rights of it were Davar Shaloi Ba La'olam. So the Rivash famously answers that before the Torah was given, you could sell something that's not in the world. So Rabbi Shula Mikuna wants to know what difference does it make before the Torah was given, after the Torah was given. Says Rabbi Shula Mikuna that before the Torah was given, the whole world was loy bal olam, because the whole world was mitli tali v'kai. It was suspended, it was hanging in the air. It was dependent on the day that Klal Yisrael would accept the Torah. So before the Torah was given, the whole world was loy bal olam. So in order to facilitate kinyanim, there had to be the ability to be makna davar shalai bal olam. That's the meaning of the Rivash, that before the Torah was given, you can be makna davar shalai bal olam, because the whole world was loy bal olam before the Torah was given. Okay, good evening everyone. So we had an amazing day today. We started off in the cemetery in Warsaw. We saw the Sochotzew Rebbe, the Amshinover Rebbe, the Radzina Rebbe, Reb Chaim Brisker, the Netziv, the Chemdash Shloimeh, Reb Aryeh Leib Tzintz. We saw the son-in-law of Rabbi Meir Simcha of Devinsk. We saw Reb Yaakov Gesundheit. We saw the Avnei Nezer, the Shem Yishmael, the tree where the Rebbe of Kutna, Rabbi Shula Mikutna. I would like to share with you the perspective of Rav Nosson Nata Hanover. Who is Rav Nosson Nata Hanover? He is the author of Yavein Metzula, which describes life in Poland in the aftermath of the Gzeros and during the Gzeros of Tach V'Tat. And he writes really a very beautiful account of what Polish Jewry was like in the 17th century. He says Polish Jewry stands on 6 pillars. What are the 6 pillars? Pillar number 1, Torah, the pillar of Torah. This one is obvious. There was not Torah like there was in Poland anywhere in the world. Says Rav Nosson Nata Hanover, Shaloi hoyo kol kach harbe Torah b'chol tfutzos Yisrael k'may b'mdilas Poland. The first thing they did was they paid their Rosh Yeshiva a lot of money. What's the advantage of that? You see, nowadays Rosh Yeshiva have to spend a lot of time collecting money. They spend a lot of time collecting money, they don't have time to learn. If they don't have time to learn, they devalue themselves as Rosh Yeshiva. In Poland, they value Torah so much, the Rosh Yeshiva did not have to go anywhere other than the Beis HaMedrash. Occasionally, he would go to the Beis HaKnesses. And then the Talmidim saw the great kavod and the esteem that Torah was held in, and they all aspired for Gadlus b'Torah. Rav Nosson Hanover writes, there was kemat no house in all of Poland that they didn't learn Torah, either the Balabayas himself, or maybe his son, or his son-in-law, or they would host a bachur, until about every home you could say the Gemara on Shabbos. Amar Rava, derachim rabbanim havilen benin rabbanim. If you love rabbanim, your children will be rabbanim. Demoika rabbanim havilei chasvanas rabbanim. If you honor rabbanim, you'll have son-in-laws who are rabbanim. Dedachil rabbanim. If you fear rabbanim, hu gufei hu tzurva mi rabbanim. You yourself will become a Talmid Chacham. And sometimes, says Rav Nosson Nata Hanover, sometimes all 3 applied in a house in Poland. As we mentioned earlier today, the method of learning in Poland was they would learn halacha. Halacha meant an amud every day, Gemara, Rashi, and Tosfos. The Rosh Yeshiva would then come into the Beis Medrash. They would ask the Rosh Yeshiva all of their she'elos, and then the Rosh Yeshiva would ask the Bachram his she'elos and say a Torah. This they did until Tu B'Av and Tu B'Shvat. Now, very interestingly, they had Gaboim. The Gaboim would test the Bachram every week. If somebody was not familiar with the material, the Shamish would come and whack and hit and beat the Talmud to make sure that that would never happen again. So there was accountability. There was physical accountability. If you did not know your learning, they beat you. And you know what? Next week, you knew your learning. Now this is the most interesting part. Many asked, we mentioned earlier that in Poland, they had a unique way of dealing with the shidduch crisis. Here it is. Twice a year after Tu B'Av and Tu B'Shvat, there was a big yerid, it was a big fair. And all the merchants came there, and when the Jews came there, the men and the women were all dressed in Big Day Malchus. They were held in very high esteem by all the nations of the world, and they would go and sell their wares. But aside from that, all the yeshiva bachram would attend, all the Rosh Yeshiva would attend, and the yeshiva bachram would try to meet new Rosh Yeshiva. Maybe they would want to switch yeshivas and vice versa. The Rosh Yeshivas would meet bachram, and any balabas would go there, and they would meet friends, associates, new people, and they would say, I have a son, he's 21, he's looking for X, Y, and Z. And the friend would say, I have a daughter, she is X, Y, and Z. And the shidduch was made. In fact, hundreds of shidduchim were made every Yerid. Sometimes a Yerid would go by and they counted 1,000 shidduchim were made at the Yerid. Now, the Rosh Yeshiva would have to get shlishi every single Shabbos and every single Yom Tif. Nobody was allowed to leave the shul until they first escorted home the Rosh Yeshiva. So that's the first pillar of Polish Jewry. Torah. Number 2, the pillar of Avodah. There were many. They would wake before Alois HaShachar to daven over the Churban Beis HaMikdash. At Alois HaShachar, they would say Tehillim. They would say Tehillim for like shh. They would say Tehillim for like an hour. Then they would daven. Nobody would leave the shul in the morning and go to work until after being in the Beis HaKnesses for quite some time and making sure after the davening to hear Divrei Torah from the Magidei Shiur. Number 3, the third pillar, Gemilas Chasadim, says Rav Nasanata Hanover. The Gemilas Chasadim in Poland was La'ein Shiur. Anytime a Rav or a Darshan would come to the community, he would automatically, immediately have lodging and a place to sleep. And especially in the area of Shidduchim, any Bachar who was a good loimed, they would grab him. And even if he was not such a good loimed, but if he had the capability to learn, very often Ashirim would hire special tutors to learn with these Bachrim, to elevate their level of learning. And then there would be women who had an association to make sure that every girl got married. Says Rav Nasanata Hanover, no girl in Poland ever reached the age of 18 without being married. Didn't happen. Didn't happen. They made sure, the community made sure everyone was taken care of. So that's the pillar of Gemilas Chasadim. Number 4, the pillar of Din. In Poland, like in the Yerushalayim, before the Beis HaMikdash, in Poland they had Batei Dinim in every single city. You didn't want to go to the Bezdin of your city, you'd go to a nearby Bezdin. If you didn't want to go there, you would go before the great court. The Midas Hadin, Dinim, the Batei Dinim were established in Poland like it was once upon a time in Yerushalayim. Number 5, the pillar of MS. Every Kehillah had appointees who would check the scales, the weights, to make sure, Glatstein, that every single stone used to measure was smooth and correct and accurate. And finally, the pillar of Shalom. The pillar of Shalom. In Poland, says Rav Nasanata Hanover, there was so much Torah that at the meals they would be mafalpel in halacha or midrashim. As long as they were eating, they were talking and learning to be mekayim the inyan of v'Torah b'soich me'ai. These are the 6 pillars upon which Polish Jewry stood. Torah, the proliferation of learning. Avodah, the excellence in davening. Gemilas Chasadim, the unparalleled acts of charity, specifically in the area of Shidduchim. Din, setting up court systems. MS, honesty, and Shalom, peace. On these 6 pillars stood the greatest center of world Jewry, Polish Jewry. Al Shisha Dvarim, Kehilos Poilin Oimed Al Gabehem. Thank you very much. Okay, you thought you were done. No. Now, the moment you've all been waiting for. The great lumdus of Rabbi Shua Kutna. This is really, I want to share with you two amazing questions. One has an answer and one has no answer. It's an imponderable. Whoever gets the answer gets a special treat. I don't know what that is yet. Okay, question number one. Rabbi Shua Kutna asks that in the Sefer HaChinuch he writes, the mitzvah of building the Beis HaMikdash will only be when the majority of the Jewish people live in the land of Israel. By the way, you know that will very soon take place. Very soon. In our time, in the very near future, the majority of the Jewish people will live in Israel. You know what that means? One thing, very simple. We could build the Beis HaMikdash. That's the opinion of the Sefer HaChinuch. The question though asks of Shua Kutna, in the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, there were only 40,000 Jews in Eretz Yisrael. They were by far, and that was not the majority of the Jewish people. How were they able to build the second Beis HaMikdash if at the time the majority of the Jewish people did not live in Eretz Yisrael? Good question, Rav Nassan. Rav Nassan gives the thumbs up. We want to thank Rav Nassan for being the mamuna over the videography. And we want to thank Rabbi Glatstein for taking this video. This is the question of Rabbi Shua Kutna. How could they build the second Beis HaMikdash? The majority of the Jewish people did not live in the land of Israel. He says it could be, we know the Gemara in Chagiga says, that after 120 the tzaddik will take his share and the share of the rasha. So from here we see that everybody has a vote, and if you don't exercise it, somebody else gets it. In the times of the second Beis HaMikdash, they all had the ability to come back. They didn't exercise it. So those who did come back have the ability to assume the role of those who chose not to. And in that sense, we could say the majority of the Jewish people were in fact in Eretz Yisrael. Says Rabbi Shua Kutna, I'll give you a raya to this. You all know that the Rambam, and based on this Rambam, Rabbi Yaakov Beirav wanted to reinstitute the original smicha system. Right? We know that today, the smicha that they give in yeshivas is not real smicha, dating back to Moshe Rabbeinu. That smicha ceased. The Rambam says that if you have the majority of the Chachmei Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael, that if the majority of the sages of Klal Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael agree, consent to reinstate smicha, you could do that. What about the Chacham that live in Chutz Haaretz? Says the Rambam, Loi mashkechina b'chachmei Chutz Haaretz. We don't pay attention to those sages who live in Chutz Haaretz. So we see from here that because those sages could have come up and they chose not to, they are irrelevant. If you have the ability to go to Eretz Yisrael and you don't, you are hereby irrelevant. And the only reason Rabbi Shua Kutna says that the Rambam leaves it as a suffix is because maybe Bisman Hazeh, the sages of Chutz Haaretz are not able to go up. So therefore they don't lose their vote and it's not assumed by those sages in Eretz Yisrael. But certainly in times of the second Beis HaMikdash, where everyone had the ability to go up, those who didn't, their role is assumed by those who did, and it can be considered that the majority of the Jewish people are in Eretz Yisrael. Now I'm going to share with you a question that nobody's going to have an answer to. No one is even going to have a suggestion. This way nobody could get the treat, because nobody will have a good answer to this imponderable. I'm happy that my friend Isaac Antabi came all the way from Panama, because Isaac likes the imponderables. So here's a Eastern Europe imponderable of Rabbi Shua Kutna. What's the halacha? If, let's say, a person cannot afford to buy Ner Chanukah, what do they have to do? They have to sell their clothing and sell their shoes to buy Ner Chanukah. Does one have to sell their clothing and sell their shoes to buy Ner Shabbos? No, we don't find such a halacha. What if somebody has a few bucks and they could either buy Ner Shabbos or Ner Chanukah? Which takes precedence? Ner Shabbos for Ner Chanukah, Ner Shabbos Adif. Why? Shalom Bayis. So as for Rabbi Shulam Kutna, I don't get it. So a guy has no money, so he sells his shoes. He gets a few bucks. Well, now that he has a few bucks, he has to buy Ner Shabbos. Yeah, but you don't have to sell your shoes to buy Ner Shabbos. So he didn't have to sell them. Yeah, but he has to sell them to buy Ner Chanukah. Yeah, but once he sells them and he only has enough for one, then he should use it for Ner Shabbos. This is an imponderable of Rabbi Shulam Kutna in a sefer called Me'at Sari. Me'at Sari are little imponderables of Rabbi Shulam Kutna. It's always good to have some learning to think about before you go to sleep. It helps you sleep better if you aren't already. Okay, good morning everyone. So yesterday we were Zochotzew to visit the Avnei Nezer, and immediately we incorporated his holy custom that Avnei Nezer, when he was in Kutsk, he only slept 2 hours a day, so that's what we did last night. Hopefully that custom will not be a regular one. And yesterday we learned that from Rav Nosson Nata Hanover, that in Poland, one of the 6 pillars that Polish Jewry stood on was Torah. He said that the custom in Poland was people would get up before Alois HaShachar to be Mesoinen on the Beis HaMikdash. People would then say Tehillim, and nobody would leave the shul until they heard at least the Dvar Torah after the davening to be Mekayim, the Indian of Yelchu, Mechayel El Choyel, Yeroy El Hashem, B'tzion, that someone who goes from the Beis HaKnesses to the Beis HaMedrash, they're Mekayim, the Indian of Yelchu, Mechayel El Choyel. And of course, the special custom they had in Poland for many hundreds of years, they didn't bring their phone with them to the davening. That's another important minhag to remember. Okay, everyone, bracha v'atzlacha, zuchusam yamed lanu ad olam. Okay, friends, we're here in Auschwitz. It's very difficult even to collect our thoughts. My grandfather, Rabbi Glatstein, was in Auschwitz, and he has many remarkable stories that I'm going to save. But here, this is the room of resistance. I want to tell you the story how in 1944, before Rosh Hashanah, 1,600 young Bachrim were taken here to Auschwitz. The sadistic capo had a metal stick, and if you reached the stick, that means you were big enough, you were tall enough to survive, and anyone who was under the stick would not survive. And after the selection, 1,400 young men were selected to go to the gas chambers on Rosh Hashanah in 1944. There's a sefer, Sochotzew Mekadshe Hashem. Sochotzew Mekadshe Hashem was written by Rav Tzvi Hersh Meisels, who was later a Rav in Chicago, one of the Rabbanim who was in Auschwitz. And a father of one of these young boys came to him to ask what he records as one of the most heart-wrenching stories he ever encountered. He had the opportunity to rescue his son, to redeem his son, to buy off his son. But rescuing his son meant sure death for another boy. So the question is, halachically, is he allowed to save the life of his own son at the expense of the life of someone else? So he came to Rabbi Tzvi Hersh Meisels and he said, Rebbe, please tell me, I'm asking you halacha l'maisa, am I halachically allowed to rescue the life of my son if I know it will mean the sure death of somebody else? I know you can't choose life. My chaz is t'dama didach sumach tvei. Who says one blood is more red than the other? And Rabbi Tzvi Hersh Meisel says, please, don't ask me this question. I don't have any of my svarim here. I don't have my shas here. I don't have any other rabbanim to consult with. Please don't ask me this question. And the father said, no, Rav, you have to tell me. If you don't tell me, then I won't be able to do this. And if you don't give me a definitive answer, I'm going to take it as a no, and I'm not going to be able to save the life of my son. So Tzvi Hersh Meisel says, no, I didn't say that. I didn't say that if I don't give you an answer, you should take that as a no. Consider it as if I never heard the question. Make it as if I never heard the question. And he said, Rebbe, you don't understand. I'm asking you halacha l'maisa. I don't make a move unless I know whether I'm allowed to do this or not. And Rav Tzvi Hersh says, no, make believe you never saw me. And the father said, Rav, I have my answer. If you cannot tell me definitively I'm allowed to do this, I will take it as a no, and I'm a kabel the psak ba'ahava uvesimcha. and he did not rescue his son. And Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Meisel said, you should know that that decision of that father probably made such a storm in the heavens. And he said the whole day on Rosh Hashanah, this father said that Avraham Avinu sacrificed Yitzchak on this day, and I merited to be oiked my son here in Auschwitz in 1944 on Rosh Hashanah. Ribon Shem, accept my offering like Akedas Yitzchak. This is an example of the types of questions and the Mesiras Nefesh that Yidden had in this Gehenna on earth. You know, and when we come here, we see the Toichacha. We're going to read this coming Shabbos, next Shabbos, Parsha Chumash, and sometimes we read the graphic descriptions of the Toichacha, and we think it's hyperbole, we think it's exaggeration, we think it's far off, and we come here and we see that whatever the Torah wrote was exactly to the point. Everything was accurate, nothing was exaggerated. Whatever it says in the Chumash, that's what happened. And l'toiva, all the good promises we should be zeicha to see with our own eyes. So we're here in Auschwitz at the location of the gas chambers and the crematoria. I want to tell you a story that's recorded in the responsa on the Shal Sechuvas Mekadshe Hashem, Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Meisel's, that happened here at the gas chambers in Auschwitz, Rosh Hashanah, 1944. We mentioned the story earlier, shortly after. It was Simchas Torah. 50 young men were sent into the gas chambers, but they said it's Simchas Torah, and this has even more compelling and profound meaning in the aftermath of the tragedy that happened on October 7th. They said it's Simchas Torah. If we're going to die, we're going to die rejoicing the way a Jew rejoices on Simchas Torah. And in the gas chambers, these Bachrim, they got together and they danced wildly with Hislahavos, with such simcha shel mitzvah that they made a loud commotion, and it was heard from outside of the gas chamber. The capo comes running in. What is this? You're mocking us? You're making fun of us in the gas chamber? This death is not painful enough for you. He took all 50 men out. He says, I'm going to reserve for you a much more painful and torturous death. He took them out. Later that day, they were sent to a different camp. All 50 of these Bachrim survived the camp. This is what we say, ki b'simcha seitzeu. With simcha, it could extract from any type of difficulty and torture. This was a nest that happened here at the gas chamber, 1944, Simchas Torah. We're standing here outside of Auschwitz, and there's a shaila lahalacha. If somebody's father or grandfather survived Auschwitz, certainly it was with great hashgacha pratis. Do you say sha'asa nes la'avi or la'avoisei b'makim hazeh? Rav Shlomo Aviner in Piskei Shlomo says no. You only make a bracha if something was a nes l'mala min ha'teva. However, it would seem for those who survived that one could argue that it was certainly something extremely miraculous. In fact, the Sefer Vayhi ben Soya of Reb Soifer writes that if someone's father or grandfather survived Auschwitz, then they would make the bracha. Other Sfarim as well bring down that anyone who survived Auschwitz certainly should make the bracha because it's considered a miracle. But what's amazing is I found that the Kalavar Rebbe, when he came to visit Auschwitz, he made the bracha, Sha'asa li'nes b'makam hazeh. That means he held that just surviving Auschwitz is considered certainly worthy of making a bracha. When my grandfather wrote in his personal memoirs about his experience in Auschwitz, he said spending a single day here in Auschwitz without losing our Tselem Elokim was nothing short of a miracle. So it wasn't just a miracle to survive, but to maintain a sense of humanity, of dignity. That was a great nace. So we're gonna, in this makom, make a bracha that is endorsed by the poskim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'asa nes la'avoisai b'makom hazeh.